Hello everyone, hope you're well. Welcome back to another lesson. I'm not by myself today. I've got my good friend Jim here. Hello Jim.
Hello, how you doing?
All right, good to see you. Now, me and Jim, we play together quite regularly every week, I think.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Now, Jim is a country guitar player. We'll get into some lessons with country a bit later on. But today, we're going to do a lesson on power chords. Now, I know what you're thinking of. Power chords, I know all there is to know about power chords. But there is quite a lot to know about power chords. You can play them not only in the regular positions, but you can do little things called inversions. You can add little extensions to them. You can play tiny bits of the power chords higher up, adding some little rhythmic fills as well. And then you can get into playing fourths. So it sounds complicated, doesn't it? So stick with us and we'll play you some examples, all right? And then at the end, we'll put it all together for you, and I'll play kind of all these ideas in a little jam with Jim. So let's get on with it. I'll just take you through the ordinary power chords first and then what you can do with them. All right, so the chords that Jim is going to play for this little jam are E minor, and a C for one bar, and a D for one bar. So it's E minor for 2 bars. Right, now that's the chords. Now, so we're going to accompany Jim over the top with some power chords. Now, first of all, I'm assuming you kind of know power chords and where they are. So first of all, obviously, you can do this. E, so that's E to C, D. That sounds pretty good. You could spice things up a little bit by adding some chromatics here. So that sounds quite good. You can certainly do that. Also, another basic thing is you can add 8th notes, so you can. So that's quite easy. Now, another thing you can do, just to give it a bit of a lift, is you can drop your little finger down. I'm using my little finger for power chords. Some people I know use their 3rd finger, but anyway, I'm going to drop that one down to that 9th fret there, and that is the octave, you see. And the octave gives it a bit of a lift, so instead of this sound, you get this. And they always sound good if you can slide. So the only thing with octaves you've got to be careful of is just to mute these other strings. That's what I'm doing here with these power chords. You know, I'm not just doing that because otherwise you'd hit all these other strings, you see. So I'm just muting with this hand. So these 2 fingers are stopping the E, the G, the B, and the other E ringing, so I can just. You can do those little rhythmic things. So that's quite cool. That's octaves. Really, really good. Now, the other thing, which is quite advanced that you can think of, is generally power chords, you play with the root. What I mean by that is that's E note, and then a C note, and then a D note. But what you can do is you can do more interesting things. You can play what's called inversions. So inversions are things like this. So if you're playing, they're playing different notes on the top. So what I mean by that, let me explain that a bit more. So let's look at an E minor chord. What notes have we got in E minor? Well, we've got an E, we've got a G, and we've got a B. All right. Now, what we can do, traditionally a power chord is just an E and a B. But what we could do is, what if we, instead of putting the E on the top, put the next note on the top, which is a G note. So let's try that. So what if we put the G on the top and then the E on the bottom? Instead of getting this sound, we get this sound. So that sounds quite cool. Then we can go further. We can say, what's the next note? There's a B. I'm playing open B there because that's in E minor. So what if we put the B on the top, on the E on the bottom? Then you'd have the second inversion. So this is the first one, E power chord. Second inversion with the G on the top. Third. And that is also known as a fourth. So you get, you hear that a lot in riffs, don't you? So that sounds quite good. So let's recap. We've got first kind of inversion, this one, with the E on the top. Then you've got the G on the top and the E on the bottom. And then the B on the top. There. And you could also, there's a B, there's another G. You could do a B instead of the E on the bottom, you could put the G on the... So if you kind of go... That's all the same chords. So you've got tons of creative abilities there. So, and you can do the same with all the chords. So if you think of a C chord, you've got C, E and G. So if I played a normal C chord, which we were doing at first. C. Now we need the E, E. And this time I'll put the G on top. So we've got an E on the bottom with G on top. The C isn't even in the chord. Now we need, the last note is a G. So there's a G. And I'll put the E on the top here, okay? So we've got this kind of sound. Those ones are a bit more tricky to stretch to, you know. So if you think of it this way, here's a C. And you're leaving 1 fret gap. If you go to the next inversion, which is up to the E, so you leave a 2 fret gap. And when you go up to the G, you now leave a 3 fret gap. So they're quite easy to remember those. Let's do one more. The D chord. It's got D, A, and F sharp in it. Okay. So there's the first one we know. First inversion, F sharp and a D on the top. And then an A with an F sharp. It's getting quite high, that's 12th fret and 16th fret. So now what you can do with all that is, the reason I'm telling you that, is you can start playing in position. So you can pick a chord, let's pick the first chord, let's E. Now instead of going all the way down to here, what we can do is think, could we play a C power chord near? And we can, because a C chord has got C, E and G, so we're already on an E note. If we just move up this little finger, that's a C note, making a power chord. So now we can go. Now we need one more chord, which is a D. Could we play that near to where we are? Well, we could go back there, that's pretty near. But we want an inversion. So instead of putting the D on the top, let's put the third note on the top, the F sharp, which is on the 9th fret. And then to the 12th fret of the D. So we got. So now that's going to sound like this. So that's really quite cool, sounding quite good. And you can muck about with that, just see. So what if we played, if you didn't want to play that one, if you wanted to play a bit darker, if you wanted to play the E here. So that's what I did there was E going to D. So let's try it. Let's see if you can find a C here. So if we went. There we go. That's this. That progression we're playing, but that's E minor there. That's 3 and 7. All right. Now we're going to play a fourth, which is for the C. There's a C on the bottom this time, G on the top, which is the 5th. and then an inversion for D. D on the top, third on the bottom there. So we got. Let's try another one. What I did at the end there was I played the D on the bottom there and the A on the top for the D chord. So I went, so instead of just playing that, I went. So there are tons of things you can do with these variations. The fourths are really good too. The fourths take just a bit of getting your head around, because it's the normally you look for the root note, the name of the chord, you know, on the top, but now it's on the bottom here. So if we were playing that in fourths, it would be. So just remember to slide those. They sound really cool if you can slide them. Can you see what I'm doing there? It's the B on the top and the E. So 7, 3 and 3, and the E and the A. 5 and 5. And that's the fourth. You can try it higher up too. There's another E. There we go. So that's fourths. You can muck about with those. They sound really, really cool. Right. Now, moving on, the next idea that we can do is something called fills, or I call them fills. Now, it's this idea. Right, so what am I doing there? Well, first of all, I'm thinking of the root notes, the E. Then I'm playing this note here, which is an F sharp. Now, that's really weird. Why am I doing that? Because I said to you, E, G, and B are the notes in this E chord, but I'm playing this F sharp. Well, that is what they call the second or the ninth. What that means is if I play the E major scale and I count up 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that note is an F sharp note. I'm not going to play it there, I'm going to play it here, an F sharp note. So it's close and you get this sound. Then I'm hammering on to get that fill to that 5th fret on the D, and that's a G note, so you get. You can add the low E in there as well if you want. That sounds quite cool. For the C, I'm doing the same thing. The ninth would be, by the way, the ninth is the same as the second, so if I play E, F sharp, it's the same as the second and ninth, so F sharp, instead of counting up 9, just count up 2. So for a C, it would be a D, so I'm playing C and a D together, so C and an open D. Then I'm adding on the third, which is the E note here on the 2nd fret of the D. For the D, the ninth is an E, so I'm going to play D and E, there's an E note there. And I'm hammering on to that 4th fret here on the D. So that sounds quite cool. So that's a little variation. When you combine all these things with fourths and these alterations, that's really cool. Right, the last thing I'm going to talk about is playing little chords and kind of altering them with that same kind of idea with the ninth. So if we look at this bar chord, if you're not familiar with bar chords, have a look on the lesson on the bar chords. If that's an E minor on the 7th fret, isn't it? But if we just take these two notes, the 9 on the G and 8 here on the B, you can get this sound. So I'm just playing the G and the B's together. Then I'm thinking of the C chords, so I'm thinking of that power chord shape, and D is the same, so I can just play that. that bit of the C, just a G and the B on the 5th fret, and then when I go to the D, 7 on the G, 7 on the B. So you have and that's quite good. That sounds quite rhythmic. Now, also you can add the ninths to that. So where is the ninth? It's the same. Find your root note, go up 2 frets, and you can do this. You can do this type of thing. Do the same with the C, ninth, 2 up. So there we go. There's some ideas for you. Take some time to get those into your playing, of course, but they're really, really cool to know. All right, so we've got all those bits and bobs together, and what I'll do now is I'll play through some of those ideas to give you an idea of how they sound with another guitar player. All right, so we'll start with some basics. We'll just start with the power chords, then we'll kind of use different ideas. So here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So just basics, just the power chords, so we know that's easy. Now let's just add some 8th notes. Again. Now let's try some inversions now. Try some octaves. So chromatics. Let's try some 4ths, low down, shall we? Let's try a little fill. Let's try a little kind of a little bit of the chord. Let's add a little kind of extension to that. So, hope that helps, putting those ideas all together. Have a go yourself, of course. Hopefully you can get another guitar player like Jim. Or, of course, you can just jam along with yourself, record that as a backing track.